3 things you should know about me. My name is Olivia. I was thrown out of my house at 11 years old for something I didn't do. And someday my family's going to regret what they did, but not in the way they expect. Before I share my story, let me know, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to the night I stopped being a child and started becoming someone else. I remember the sound of the door slamming shut behind me, the kind that doesn't just close, it rejects. Final, cold, like my mother's voice when she told me to get out. "You're a liar, Olivia. Go cry about it somewhere else." My shoes were mismatched. One pink Converse, one purple. I didn't have time to fix it when she screamed at me to leave. All because my brother Luke said I hit him. I didn't. He'd pushed me first. Hard, over the remote of all things. But he was 15, taller, louder, better at making his tears look real. And Mom didn't even ask questions. She just believed him. That was the worst part. She didn't ask. She didn't care. I stood on the porch holding a jacket that wasn't mine. It was Luke's old one with a ripped zipper and the smell of Axe body spray. The Oklahoma wind cut through it like paper. I thought she would change her mind. I sat on the front steps. 10 minutes. Then 20. Then an hour. I thought she'd call me back inside. Maybe whisper that she overreacted, that dinner was still on the stove. But the porch light turned off. And I realized I wasn't waiting to be forgiven, I was being erased. The neighborhood was asleep except for the occasional car crawling down the block. I didn't cry. I knew better than to make noise. Crying only made things worse at home, so I walked. Tulsa in December is cruel. The kind of cold that stings your eyes and burns your throat. But it didn't hurt as much as being thrown away by the only person who was supposed to protect me. I walked past familiar houses with wreaths on the doors. Windows lit with golden lamplight and TV flickers. Families, warmth, laughter I wasn't part of. I ended up outside a bakery that had closed for the holidays. A chalk sign in the window read, "Closed until Jan 3rd, see you in the new year." I curled up on the concrete bench, hugging Luke's jacket tighter. My toes were numb. My hands raw. But I wasn't thinking about the cold. I was thinking about my dad. He died when I was 9, heart failure, sudden, devastating. But before he passed, he told me something I never forgot. He bent down one night after tucking me in and said, "No one throws you away, kiddo. Not ever, not even if they try." I nodded like I understood, even though I didn't. But sitting there, knees pulled to my chest, I finally knew what he meant. No one throws you away unless you let them. And I wasn't going to let them. Not Mom, not Luke. Not the system that would probably label me a runaway by morning. I clenched my jaw so tight it ached. And with my breath frosting in the air, I made a vow. Someday, I'll own a home no one can throw me out of. No one will have the power to cast me aside again. I'll build a life so solid, so untouchable, that even my mother will have to look up to me from the outside. I didn't know where I'd go next. But I knew this. I was going to survive. And I was going to win. I came back the next morning with frostbitten fingers and a promise stitched into my skin like armor. I didn't say where I'd been, and she didn't ask. Mom stood at the kitchen counter, stirring her coffee with that chipped spoon she always used. Luke was already dressed for school, smirking at the toast she'd made him. Not a word about the night before, not even a glance in my direction. That's when I knew nothing I did would ever matter to her unless it served someone else. So I stopped trying. I didn't speak unless I had to, not because I couldn't, but because silence was the only thing she hadn't taken from me. At school, teachers noticed the shift. My answers turned into nods. My eyes stayed glued to my notebooks. I aced every quiz, every project, every test, but never raised my hand. They called it withdrawn. I called it safe. At home, I cleaned obsessively. I scrubbed the bathroom tiles until my fingers cracked, cooked dinner with surgical precision, folded laundry before anyone could complain. If I wasn't invisible, I was useful. And useful meant tolerated. I used to think love looked like bedtime stories and birthday cakes. Now, love looked like silence, like not getting yelled at for overcooking rice, like being ignored instead of insulted. Luke flourished. Mom was obsessed with his baseball scholarship, drove him to every practice, cheered louder than anyone at games, posted his stats on Facebook like they were stock market wins. Me. I was background noise, but I didn't care. I didn't need her anymore. Not after that night. Every day after school, I retreated to my room with a bowl of rice and beans and studied like the world was ending. It kind of was, at least my world. But with each book, each fact, each solved equation, I was building a new one. Quietly, steadily. I researched scholarships, out of state universities, any path that could get me far from Tulsa. I found Arizona State University and felt something tighten in my chest, a flicker of hope I didn't dare speak aloud. I kept it to myself. I kept everything to myself. I applied in secret, printed essays at the library, filled out forms on a prepaid phone I'd bought with tips from cleaning my neighbor Mrs. Hughes's gutters. I remember the day the acceptance letter came. It arrived in a thick envelope, the kind that says you belong somewhere. I didn't show it to anyone. I just held it in my lap, staring at the bold letters. Congratulations, Olivia Carter. That night, I made spaghetti and cleaned the stove twice. Mom came home late from Luke's playoff dinner and didn't notice I was already packed. She didn't ask when I was leaving, and I didn't tell her. On the morning I left for college, I put my bags in the back of a cab at 6:12 a.m. No hugs, no tears, no warnings, just one last look at the house that had never been mine, and a quiet whisper in the back of my mind. Next time you come back here, Olivia, it'll be on your terms. When the cab pulled away from my childhood home, I didn't look back. I told the driver I was headed to Phoenix. He asked if I was excited for school, and I said, yeah. That was the most I'd said to a stranger in months. I arrived at Arizona State with 2 duffel bags, $320 in cash, and a fire that burned hotter than the desert sun. I wasn't there to make friends. I wasn't there for parties or tailgates or dorm mixers. I was there to win my freedom. 1 credit hour at a time. My dorm room smelled like fresh paint and microwave popcorn. My roommate, Janelle, was the kind of girl who decorated with fairy lights and cried over her long-distance boyfriend nightly. We coexisted like polite strangers, which suited me fine. I didn't want emotional entanglements. I'd just escaped a lifetime of them. Classes were tough. I made them tougher by overloading every semester. I waitressed at a greasy 24-hour diner where the cooks smoked behind the fryers and the regulars tipped in loose change. Graveyard shifts, mostly. That way I could tutor undergrads during the day. There were nights I didn't sleep, just blinked at spreadsheets until sunrise, then rinsed my face in cold water and started again. My body ached. My mind burned. But it was mine, all of it. My textbook sat where a photo of my family might have gone. The only picture I kept was of my dad, tucked into the front of my binder. His eyes crinkled with laughter like he knew how this would all turn out. You were right, Dad. No one throws me away. I rarely called home. On the few occasions I did, Mom only asked about Luke. How's your brother doing in sales? Still at that tech startup? Not once. How are you, Olivia? Not once. Do you need anything? I didn't even know she had my number until one call right after finals week. She answered like I was a telemarketer. Hello. It's me, I said. A pause, then, oh, Olivia. Well, Luke's promotion came through. And that was the conversation. I got off the phone and laughed. It wasn't funny, really. But it was that kind of laugh that tastes like rust and memory. I'd traded one kind of loneliness for another, but this version I chose, and that made all the difference. There were no fists banging on doors here. No accusations, no icy silences that sucked the air out of rooms. Just the quiet thrum of my will to succeed. Every morning I woke up and whispered to myself, one more step. Just one more. Every week I sent $20 to a savings account I'd named Horizon, even when it meant skipping dinner. I still remember the first time I bought something for myself with that money, a second-hand blazer for job interviews. When the cashier bagged it up, I felt like I was holding a flag, proof that I was coming for something bigger. And slowly, painfully, I started to believe I could make it. Graduation day smelled like hot concrete and wilted carnations. I'd pressed my gown the night before, smoothing every wrinkle like I was trying to erase the years it took to earn it. Summa cum laude, honors cords, departmental distinction. But when they called my name, the applause was polite, generic. There was no one in the crowd holding a sign with my name. No tearful parents. No proud siblings filming with shaky hands, just the dry Arizona wind and the sound of my heels on the riser. Still, when I took the diploma, something inside me shifted. Not joy, not relief, power, because I hadn't just graduated. I had survived everything they'd put me through, every slammed door, every gaslit silence, every reminder that I was disposable. I left the stadium alone. No celebratory dinner. No group photos in a family circle. Instead, I walked to a nearby coffee shop and ordered a muffin and a cold brew with my last $9. I sat in the corner booth by the window and stared at my reflection in the glass. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. Sharp eyes. A posture too upright for someone her age. No one would have guessed she used to sleep in library corners between shifts. I opened my email and stared at my inbox. 35 unread messages. Congratulations from professors, scholarship offices, alumni networks. But nothing from home. Not even a text. Not even, well, I guess you did it. And somehow that stung more than I expected. 6 months later, I held a silver key in my hand and walked into my very first condo. It was just under 800 square feet, 3rd floor, slightly outdated kitchen. But the floors were real wood, and the sun hit just right through the south-facing window. I stood in the middle of the living room and whispered, "You did it, Liv." The word home didn't feel haunted anymore. I slept that night on an air mattress with a pile of blankets and a half-empty wine bottle beside me. And I cried, not because I was sad, but because I had finally landed somewhere no one could shove me out of. I hung sheer curtains the next morning, installed dimmable lights, bought second-hand furniture with character. Every item had a story, every corner a purpose. There was no one there to share it with, but that made it sacred. The startup began a year later. It started with a freelance job helping a boutique legal firm fix their cybersecurity mess. They paid in cash, then a referral came, then another. I built the business like I'd built myself, quietly, efficiently, obsessively. Late nights, missed meals. I didn't have weekends, I had release cycles. At first, it was just me in my living room, surrounded by whiteboards and snack wrappers. Then it became 2 people, then 4. By the time we hit our first anniversary, we had a Phoenix office, 4 full-time staff, and a waiting list of clients. I still couldn't believe it. Sometimes I'd stare at my bank statements just to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined the numbers. But nothing hit me harder than the day I became a millionaire. It was a Friday afternoon in August. I was eating pad thai at my desk when the notification buzzed. A deposit from a corporate client, 7 figures. 6 zeros. I blinked once, twice, 3 times. I clicked the transaction to double-check, then again. It wasn't a mistake. I logged out, pushed my laptop aside, and stared at the wall. And then the tears came. Not just tears, sobs, gut-deep, wordless. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. It meant the nights I'd gone hungry were worth something. It meant the cold Tulsa curb outside that bakery wasn't the end of me. It meant I was right. I could build a life no one could take. And yet, even in that triumph, there was a hole. I didn't know who to call. There wasn't a single person from my past who would understand what that number cost me. No one who would say, "I always believed in you." So I sat there in my glass-walled office with my knees pulled up to my chest and tears soaking my blouse. A millionaire. And still, at times, the loneliest person I knew. But even that loneliness felt cleaner now. Less like abandonment, more like distance earned. I got up, wiped my face, looked in the mirror and said, "Okay, Liv, you did it. Now build something bigger." It started in Costa Rica. A beach bonfire, my feet buried in warm sand, a drink sweating in my hand, and the lull of crashing waves behind our laughter. My friends, my chosen people, had surprised me with the trip to celebrate our company's second funding round. They toasted to the girl who went from server trays to servers and code. And for once, I let myself soak it in. I was sitting beside Rhea, my college roommate's best friend turned my own, when she leaned in and asked quietly, "Do you ever think about calling her?" It caught me off guard. I hadn't mentioned my mother to anyone here. Not really. I'd built walls around that part of my life, sealed tight with silence and sarcasm. But somehow Rhea knew, or maybe she just saw through the performance. "I don't know what I'd say," I murmured. "You wouldn't have to say much," she said gently. "Sometimes people just want a chance to know who you became." That stuck with me, not because I believed it, but because, deep down, I wanted it to be true. The night before we left Costa Rica, I stayed up late watching the ocean from the hammock on our villa porch. My skin smelled like sunscreen and smoke. My hair was still damp from swimming. And I thought about that 11-year-old girl again. The one who stood shivering in the street, clutching a jacket that didn't fit. The one who kept waiting for the door to open again. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't used in years. I hovered over it. Then closed the screen. Not yet, but maybe. Back home, it happened on a Wednesday. I was filing receipts and onboarding a new developer when I saw the date on my desktop, April 12th, my father's birthday. He'd been gone 15 years. But somehow that date still made my chest ache. So I did the one thing I promised I wouldn't. I called her. The phone rang 3 times, 4, then a click. Hello. Her voice, rougher now, still clipped, still sharp around the edges. It's Olivia. Silence, then softly, Olivia. Like she wasn't sure I was real. I just wanted to say hi. Another pause, then a breath I hadn't heard in years. I didn't think you'd ever call. I didn't think so either. I expected anger, bitterness, coldness at least, but she sounded small, almost grateful. We didn't talk about the past, not at first. She told me Luke was still in sales, that she'd retired early after some medical thing she brushed off with a cough. I told her I'd been traveling for work, kept it vague. We danced around the wreckage like it wasn't still smoldering. But then, without warning, she asked, "Are you happy, Olivia?" I didn't know how to answer, because yes, I had everything. And also, sometimes, nothing at all. "I'm building something good," I said finally, "and it's mine." She went quiet again, then so faint I almost missed it. I think about that night all the time. I felt my throat tight. "Which one?" "You know which." I didn't respond. I couldn't. "I don't have excuses," she said, voice brittle. "Only regrets, but those don't fix anything." "No," I said, eyes burning. "They don't." We sat in that silence together, not comfortable, not redemptive, just honest. Before we hung up, she said something I didn't expect. "Maybe we could talk again sometime, if you want." I didn't promise anything, but I didn't say no. And somehow that felt bigger than any apology. It was my idea. I called it a fresh start. Paris, Rome, Santorini, 3 weeks, 5-star hotels, first-class flights, all expenses paid. When I told my friends, they blinked like I'd lost my mind. "You're taking your mother and Luke to Europe?" Rhea asked slowly, like maybe she'd misheard. "I am." "Olivia," she said carefully, "people don't change just because the scenery does." But I wasn't doing it because I believed they had changed. I was doing it because I wanted to believe I had, that I could walk back into that dynamic and stay whole, stay strong, stay me, and maybe prove something that I had won, that I had enough to share. So I sent the invitations in gold-embossed envelopes, wrote a note that read, "Let's turn a corner." I didn't expect a heartfelt thank you, but when my mother called me crying, I felt something tighten in my chest. "I never thought we'd get a second chance," she said. "I'm proud of you." It was the first time she'd said that, ever. I pretended not to cry after we hung up. We flew out in early May. The plane to Nice was nearly empty in first class. Luke bragged about crypto. Mom sipped champagne and stared out the window. I watched them both, trying to see signs of the past. But all I saw were 2 strangers who looked vaguely familiar. Luke had aged well, handsomer than he deserved to be. Tan, slick hair, designer sneakers. But underneath his cologne was the same scent I remembered, arrogance. "Invested in a startup that's about to go public," he said casually, tipping back his scotch. "Could be huge. Timing everything, right?" I smiled politely. I knew a bluff when I heard one. Mom wore pearls to the airport. She kept adjusting them like they were armor. Every time I tried to make real conversation, she deflected. "How work?" I asked. "Oh, busy, you know." "What kind of books are you reading lately?" "Oh, I haven't had time." She asked about my company, nodded through my answers, and quickly changed the subject. Still, I let it go. I was determined not to push. I told myself, just let it be light. Let it be different. Paris was golden. We ate escargot and sipped wine on the Seine. Luke flirted with the server, left a $3 tip on a $90 bill. Mom pretended not to notice. In Rome, we took a Vespa tour. I laughed genuinely for the first time in days. Luke snapped photos of himself in sunglasses like he was cataloging proof of success. Mom clutched her handbag tightly at every stop. In Santorini, I paid for a private yacht day. We danced barefoot on the deck. She smiled so wide it startled me. Luke gave me a toast. To the little sister who turned out to be the big boss. It should have felt good, but something in his tone was off, too smooth, too rehearsed. Still, I smiled, clinked my glass, said to the future. But the future was already shifting. It started small, a glance, a whisper. One morning in Rome, I came down to breakfast early and caught them mid-conversation, Luke leaning close to Mom, her hand clutching her coffee cup tight, eyes darting toward the hallway. They stopped talking the moment I entered. "We were just talking about the tour schedule," Mom said too quickly. I didn't question it, I should have. In Santorini, I came back to my suite after dinner to find my laptop slightly moved. Nothing was missing, nothing obvious anyway, but I felt it. Luke claimed he was just looking for sunscreen when I confronted him. It was always something small, a misstep, a look, a lie with a grin, but each one chipped at the shiny dream I'd built for this trip. By the time we reached Nice, I was tired. Not from the travel, but from pretending. Pretending this was healing, pretending I was safe. The morning we were supposed to visit the lavender fields, I received a message, encrypted, on my secure phone. A line of text that chilled me more than anything else on this trip. Go quietly. Say nothing to your brother or your mother. That was it. No signature, no explanation. I stared at the screen as the world tilted sideways. I looked up and saw them at the breakfast table. Laughing, Luke pouring syrup, Mom adjusting her scarf. Something in me went still. I stood, pressed a hand to my forehead. "Headache," I said. "I think I'll skip the day trip." They barely reacted. "Feel better," Mom said, not meeting my eyes. That night I left. Booked a solo flight back to the States under an alias. I didn't pack much, just what I could fit in my carry-on. In the taxi, I stared out at the French Riviera sparkling under the streetlights. And I couldn't help but think, had they been planning something? Was I imagining it? Was I paranoid? Or was my gut finally screaming what I refused to believe? That maybe, just maybe, this was never about a second chance. Maybe it was about what I had, and how far they'd go to take it. The jet lag didn't hit me. The fear did. I didn't sleep on the flight from Nice to JFK. Every blink felt like a risk. Every movement in the cabin, every cough, every footstep made my muscles tense. I replayed everything. The glances between Luke and Mom, the moved laptop, the cryptic message, "Go quietly. Don't say anything to your brother or your mother." I didn't know who sent it, but I knew why I listened. Because somewhere deep in my bones, I knew what I didn't want to admit. Something was very, very wrong. When we landed, the customs line was endless. I kept my sunglasses on inside the terminal, pulse thudding in my ears. I made it past passport control. But as I neared baggage claim, 3 people stepped out of nowhere. 2 men, 1 woman, sharp suits, federal badges. My breath caught. "Ms. Carter," the woman said quietly. "Please come with us." No cuffs, no spectacle, just a quiet, firm detour away from the crowd. We moved through a side door into a narrow hallway, then into a small room with mirrored glass, 2 chairs, and a steel table. The door shut with a soft, terrifying click. "I need you to stay calm," said one of the men. "You're not under arrest, but what we're about to show you is serious." He placed a tablet on the table, pressed play. What I heard wasn't just serious, it was soul-shattering, a recorded conversation. Encrypted, intercepted, and translated, between a known contractor and the person who tried to hire him. "You'll get the rest when it's done. She'll be in Europe, no security." Just make it look like an accident. My name, my location, the timeline of our trip, and then the name of the payment source, Luke Carter. I stopped breathing. "No," I whispered. "No, there's some mistake." The woman across from me looked pained. "I'm sorry, Olivia, but we've been monitoring him for a while. There's more." They showed me transaction logs, crypto transfers, a burner phone link. The plan had been in place for months. "But why?" My voice cracked. "Why would he?" The man leaned forward. "He's in debt, deep. Owes money to people we've been investigating for years. He thought killing you would solve his problem and give him access to your company if you didn't have a clear succession plan." I thought of his fake bravado, his crypto lies, the yacht toast. To the little sister who turned out to be the big boss. My stomach turned. "But here's the thing," the agent continued. "The hit never went through. The contractor wanted final confirmation." He paused. That's when we sent you the warning." I sat there numb, my fingers trembled in my lap. "And your mother?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "Was she involved?" They exchanged a look. "She's not in any of the direct messages," the woman said carefully. "But she was part of the communication web. She's been in contact with him during every key moment of the planning timeline." I closed my eyes, my entire chest ached. "Olivia," the woman said softly, "we want to keep you safe, but we also need your help." I opened my eyes. "What do you need?" They laid it out like a screenplay. We'd stage a scenario, a believable accident, a hiking fall outside Sedona. I'd disappear for a few days, long enough to trigger reactions. Meanwhile, they'd watch Luke, see what he did, who he called, what he tried next. And if he moved to finish the job or pay someone else to, it would be enough. Enough to make an arrest, enough to prove intent. "Do you trust us?" the agent asked. I wanted to say no. But I didn't have the luxury of trust anymore. All I had was survival. And clarity. I nodded. 2 days later, the news broke. Tech CEO Olivia Carter missing in Arizona Canyon accident. My company released a statement. Search and rescue efforts were underway. The world began to mourn. I watched it all from a safe house in the desert. One-way windows, burner phones, silence. The agents checked in hourly. And on the second night, they showed me the footage. Luke, sitting at a cafe with a man in a hoodie, sliding an envelope across the table. The same man from the intercepted message. Money changed hands. He didn't even look sad, didn't even pretend. And that was all they needed. They arrested him on the spot. Hands behind his back, no fight, no remorse. The man who once pushed me onto the sidewalk smiled as he lied to our mother, whispered about little sisters in toasts, was now in handcuffs for trying to erase me. My own brother. The one she always believed over me. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, watching the footage loop. And for the first time since I was 11, I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, not even betrayal, just a hollow quiet where a family should have been. They let me watch her arrive first. The room was cold, no windows, no clock, just a metal table, 2 chairs, and a wall of mirrored glass that only looked like a mirror from her side. She stepped in quietly. Her hair looked thinner than I remembered. Her pearls were gone. She clutched her purse like it could shield her from what was coming. She looked scared. And for a moment, just one, I felt something flicker in my chest. Then I remembered the audio logs, the crypto trail, my brother's smirk as he passed a man an envelope with my death inside it, and the flicker turned to ash. "She's asking for you," the agent said. I didn't know why I nodded. Maybe because some answers are worth burning for. They brought me in slowly. Told me to keep the conversation natural, calm. It would be recorded, monitored, used if needed. I stepped into the room. She looked up, her face crumbled. "Olivia," she gasped. "Oh my God, they told me they said." "I'm not dead," I said flatly, taking the chair opposite hers. She reached for my hand. I didn't move. The silence pressed in. Then she whispered, "I sent the message." I froze. "What?" "I sent the message," she repeated, eyes welling. "The one that warned you. That told you to leave them behind and nice." My jaw locked. "You knew." My voice cracked. She nodded, trembling. "I found out not everything, just enough. I saw something on Luke's tablet, messages. He left it open one night. I confronted him." "And what did he say?" "That he was desperate, that he owed people and they were closing in. He said he had a plan to make it all go away." She blinked. I begged him to stop. "Why didn't you come to me?" Her lip quivered. "Because I was afraid. Luke, he wasn't my little boy anymore. He scared me." I stared at her, searching her face for some truth, some lie. They all looked the same now. "I tried to talk him out of it," she said. "He said if I told anyone, they'd come after me too. So you sent me a one-line warning and hoped for the best." "I thought you'd be safe," she whispered. "I thought if I just gave you a chance to get out." She broke off, voice shaking. "I didn't know what else to do. I've always protected him, always. Even when I shouldn't have. Even when it meant," she trailed off. "Even when it meant throwing your daughter out at 11, I said, her face crumpled again. "Yes," she choked. "That night has haunted me. You don't understand. I was drowning too. Your father had just died. We were broke and Luke was spiraling. You got caught in the middle." "I did get caught. I was targeted," I said coldly. "You chose him over and over." "I know." Those 2 words nearly undid me because they weren't defensive. They weren't delusional. They were honest. "I let it happen," she said softly. I let him happen because it was easier to blame you than to face what he was becoming. I looked at the woman who had once brushed my hair, then turned around and left me to freeze outside her home. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't innocent. She was just weak, and weakness can kill, too. I'm not here for an apology, I said. Then why are you here? She asked. To know for myself, so that when I move forward, I'm not wondering what would have happened if I asked. She looked at her hands. I don't expect forgiveness. You won't get it, she nodded. But I'm not going to press charges against you, I added. The feds will make their decision. I've made mine. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't do it for you, I said, standing. I did it so I could sleep at night. I walked to the door. She didn't stop me. Just before I opened it, I turned back. Luke's going away for 25 years, I said. You'll be alone. She gave a bitter smile. I've been alone for longer than you think. Outside the room, the agents debriefed me. They asked if I was okay. I said yes, because I was. For the first time, I was finally undeniably okay. Not because she'd cried, not because she regretted it, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not her approval, not her explanation, not even her love. I had all the answers I needed, and nothing left to prove. A month after Luke's sentencing, I bought a house on a lake. It wasn't flashy or cold like the condo I bought at 26. This one had soft edges, a wraparound porch, warm wood floors that creaked just enough to feel alive. The kitchen caught the morning sun like it had been waiting for someone to smile there. I signed the papers in silence. No realtors hovering, no champagne toast. Just me, a pen, and the feeling of finally having roots. A place where no one had ever raised their voice. A place where no child had ever been thrown out. A place I could claim as mine and maybe offer something different inside it. The day I moved in, the furniture was still wrapped in plastic. The fridge was empty. But I stood in the doorway and whispered the same words I did when I bought my condo. No one can throw me out now. And then I did something that made my friends think I'd lost my mind. I invited her to move in. Not to reconnect. Not to forgive, to manage her, because the courts didn't charge her. They deemed her a bystander, but I knew better. Bystanders who look away become architects of damage, so I drew up a contract. Literally. A binding agreement. Not legal, emotional. She'd live in the guest suite, not the main house. She'd attend therapy twice a week. No missed sessions. We'd have weekly reviews, no lies, no rewriting history. She could stay if she earned the right to. When I gave her the terms, she didn't argue. She just read them slowly and said, "That's fair." She moved in with 2 suitcases and a face aged by regret. The first few days, she barely spoke. She asked where the towels were, if she could use the kitchen, if the mailbox had a key. She never once called it home, and I never offered it. We coexisted, carefully. I worked from my home office. She kept to the sunroom or her bedroom. Sometimes we crossed paths in the kitchen, both reaching for coffee. Sometimes she'd linger like she wanted to say something. But I never gave her the opening. Not yet. Therapy was required. She hated it at first, I could tell. She'd come home with red-rimmed eyes and locked lips, but she never skipped. She never once said it was useless. Over time, the sessions started to shift her. Not quickly, not dramatically, but in small ways, like when I walked in one day and found the dishwasher already emptied, or when she started making dinner quietly, without assuming I'd eat with her. She was learning to ask instead of assume. One night, I found her in the living room watching old black and white movies. "I used to watch these with your dad," she murmured, then looked down. "I don't expect you to care, just thought you should know." I didn't respond, but I stayed in the room until the movie ended. It was a start. The walls of the house remained pale blue like calm breath. I kept the space soft, light, simple. It was the opposite of the house I grew up in. No loud clocks, no door slams, no walking on eggshells. Here, truth echoed. Even when it hurt, and she started to speak truth. In a therapy review one afternoon, she said something that caught me off guard. "I didn't protect you because I thought love was conditional, that I had to hold on to one child by sacrificing the other. But I was wrong. Real love doesn't ask for martyrs." I didn't say anything, but I wrote it down later, because sometimes the things you can't respond to are the ones that stick. Do I love her now? No, but I don't hate her anymore either. She's no longer a ghost with power. She's just a woman who made terrible choices and now wakes up every day trying to face them. And that I can live with, Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like setting the table for two and eating in silence on your own terms. The idea didn't come to me like lightning. It came like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Every day I passed by my office window and saw a girl who wasn't me but could have been. She sat on the steps outside a gas station for hours, curled under a hoodie too big for her. Always alone, always watching the world as if it didn't belong to her. And something in my chest clicked. Not in rage, not even pity, just memory. Because I knew what it was like to live in that kind of quiet. The kind that didn't scream but ached. I watched her for days until I couldn't anymore. That night, I opened my laptop and didn't stop typing for hours. I was going to build something. Not another business. Not a campaign. A place that could have saved me. I named it Daniel House, after the man who told me in the gentlest voice, "No one throws you away." It would be a shelter for girls aged 10-18 who had been kicked out, disowned, or left behind. Not because they were bad, but because the people meant to protect them didn't. We would take them in before the world could turn them cold. Before they learned to shrink or scream to be heard. Before they believed love had to be earned with silence. I didn't want pity. I wanted power, infrastructure, funding, permanence, so I got to work. I met with architects, social workers, trauma counselors. I consulted with former foster care youth, women who had aged out of shelters, survivors of group homes and couch-hopping teenage years. They told me what they needed. I listened. We wouldn't be another sad beige building with peeling paint and forced curfews. Daniel House would be filled with light. Soft blues and greens on the walls. Bedrooms with real doors, desks, lamps, mirrors that weren't cracked. There would be a kitchen where girls could cook, not just be fed, a library curated by survivors, a tech lab, a therapy room that looked like a lounge, a garden, a quiet corner for crying that didn't feel like punishment. Every girl would have her own key, not just to a room, but to the beginning of her future. When I told my board of investors what I was doing, a few raised eyebrows. "This is personal, isn't it?" one asked. I smiled. "Isn't everything that matters?" A few withdrew. I didn't chase them. Because new people came in, quiet philanthropists, survivors, women who once lived in their cars. And they didn't just bring money, they brought purpose. We bought land outside Phoenix by a lake near a high school away from chaos. The zoning board tried to fight us, but I didn't back down. For every no, I brought a dozen yes signatures. Every obstacle only sharpened my resolve, because I wasn't just fighting for space. I was fighting for existence. For every girl who'd ever heard, "You're the problem," and believed it. One day I came home from a site visit, mud on my shoes, sawdust in my hair. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea. She looked up. "You've changed," she said. "No," I replied. "I've just become who I was meant to be." She nodded, didn't argue. Then quietly, "I wish I had done one thing in my life with the kind of clarity you live with." I didn't reply. But something inside me settled. Not peace, but maybe recognition. Construction took 11 months. The first sign was nailed into the ground with my own hands. Daniel House, for girls who deserved to stay. We didn't just build a shelter. We built a beginning. The staff was all hand-picked, compassionate, firm, real. Not saviors, not martyrs. Just people who understood that dignity is a survival tool. And when the doors finally opened, our first resident arrived with a garbage bag full of clothes, a cracked iPhone, and eyes that didn't look at anyone. We welcomed her with silence, warm food, and clean sheets. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to, because this place wasn't built for gratitude. It was built for her. Every scar I carried, every lonely night, every betrayal that nearly broke me, it lived in the walls of that house. Not as decoration, but as foundation. This wasn't charity, it was reclamation, and it wasn't just for them, it was for me. Because every time I walk through the halls, every time I hear a girl laugh, every time someone slams a door because she finally feels safe enough to have feelings, I heal too. Have you ever turned your deepest hurt into someone else's lifeline? What did you build? A place, a movement, a choice? Tell me in the comments, because survival is step 1. Building something bigger, that's how you win. Part 11, the final epilogue, is next. It's the ribbon cutting, the speech. And the moment Olivia finally names what saved her, you'll want to be there. The air smelled like wood shavings and fresh paint. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the entryway, casting soft streaks across the polished floors. The garden outside, still young, still growing, was dotted with purple lilies and tender green shoots. Someone had tied yellow ribbons to the new tree out front, and inside, 50 folding chairs lined the common room, facing a small wooden podium and a hand-painted sign that read, Daniel House Grand Opening. I stood behind the podium in a dark green dress and low heels. My hands were steady. To my left, my mother sat in the front row, silent, composed, her therapist beside her. To my right, the staff, volunteers, donors, city officials. My closest friends, Rhea included, who had seen me build this place from bruised memory and sleepless blueprints. And in the last few rows, the girls, the first 7 residents, some with their arms crossed, eyes guarded, some nervously chewing gum, one staring out the window like she might bolt at any moment. I saw myself in every single one. I tapped the mic gently. It whined, then settled. I looked at them all and smiled, not a perfect smile, but a real one. The kind you earn after surviving a storm. Thank you for being here, I began. I want to tell you a story. I heard one of the girls sigh. Another shifted, arms still crossed. I let them. It starts on a sidewalk in Tulsa, on a night so cold my breath froze before it hit the ground. I paused. The room went still. I was 11, and my mother told me not to come back inside. I had no coat, no suitcase, no plan. I wasn't even sure what I'd done wrong. A flicker of shock crossed a few faces in the front row, but the girls in the back didn't flinch. They knew. I slept outside that night, and in the morning I made myself a promise that one day I'd own a house no one could take from me. I stepped away from the mic for a beat. And today I'm keeping that promise, not just for me, but for every girl who's ever been told she's disposable. A quiet sound, half gasp, half breath, rose from somewhere in the audience. I continued. This place isn't about pity, it's about possibility. It's about giving space and safety and silence when needed, but also tools, education, boundaries, healing. I looked directly at the girls now. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness, not even the people who raised you, especially not them. A long pause. But you do owe yourself a life, and I hope Daniel House is where you begin building it. One of the girls lowered her arms. Another blinked quickly, staring straight at me. I swallowed hard. My voice softened. I called it Daniel House because my father once whispered something to me when I felt invisible. He said, "No one throws you away." I looked down just briefly, then back up, eyes shining. And I believe that still, no matter where you come from, no matter who failed you, no matter what they told you. Another pause. You could hear the creak of a chair as someone sat up straighter. This place, this home, is your proof. They clapped, softly at first, then louder. Not a standing ovation. Not fireworks, just human hands meeting human hands. Enough. Afterward, the ribbon was cut. The first group took their tour, cameras flashed, local reporters scribbled notes. But the only moment that mattered to me came an hour later when one of the girls, maybe 16, approached me alone. She had freckles and chipped nails. Her backpack was torn at the strap. "Miss Olivia?" she asked quietly. I turned. "Yes," she hesitated, then said, "Your story." It made me think maybe I'm not broken, just in a bad chapter. I knelt so we were eye level. "You're not broken," I said. "And even if you were broken, crayons still color." She nodded, didn't smile, just walked away slowly, shoulders straighter than before. That night I stood on the porch of Daniel House and looked out over the lake. My mother stood beside me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I knew she'd heard every word. And I knew she'd have to live with it. That was enough. I wasn't here to punish. I was here to plant, to grow something from the scorched soil of my childhood. And for the first time, I understood. I had taken the worst night of my life and built a sanctuary from its ashes. Have you made it out of something that should have broken you? Drop a dove in the comments if you're still healing, or if you've turned your survival into someone else's hope. This story began with exile. It ends with a key. Thank you for staying with me through Olivia's journey. And remember, no one throws you away. Not for long, not forever.